So how exactly could heavier weights, more complicated gymnastic movements actually make something more accessible and more inclusive? Let's find out. Welcome back to the channel. So today I've got an interesting topic, one I never imagined I'd be speaking about, but I want to talk about Grid League, particularly the Florida Grid League. Now, I'd heard talk of Grid League, and I would say from within CrossFit, I probably heard it talked about the same way I hear people talk about CrossFit that don't do CrossFit. But as always, I kind of like to form my own opinion, so I went away and I've watched some Grid League, and I've got some observations. I think there are some things that are quite interesting, and it would be very interesting to see how they could be applied maybe on a local level within CrossFit competitions. So before you start thinking, oh, he's betrayed CrossFit, how dare he talk about Grid League, he should never be allowed to share his opinion on CrossFit in a public forum again, just watch the whole video, because I do think there are some interesting points here. And if you're watching this and you've got no idea what Grid League is, here's an example of some of the things that they do. The triple touch, toes to bar, chest to bar, bar muscle up. As if some of us aren't struggling with at least one of these movements just on their own. Another example? Yes, how can we make burpees more difficult? Why not throw in a pistol, a backflip, or a pullover? One more example for you. So clearly we've got some pretty great athletes that we're talking about here. But it's not just complicated gymnastics movements, they also have a lot of strength bias elements to them as well. Now, if that looks intimidating to you, I want to tell you that I actually think something that Grid does really well with these gymnastic movements and strength movements, if applied to local CrossFit competitions, could actually make it more inclusive for your average CrossFit athlete. And of course, there's also the discussion about the separation of the sport and methodology, because that's always interesting to think about. But before we get into all of this, if you're here for the first time and you haven't subscribed, please do so. It really does help me out. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to Kaylee Walsh of the Palm Beach Breakers, who sent me some links and sort of started me down this whole Grid League rabbit hole, and we've ended up here with a video. And I'd also like to thank Jennifer Allen, because she's someone who I bounced a few ideas off about how this could be applied within CrossFit as well. So thank you for the help with the video. So very quickly, I'd just like to talk about that idea of the separation of sport and methodology before I then jump into how more complicated gymnastic movements, heavier barbells could actually result in more people from your local box getting involved in competitions. Now, of course, this is a conversation that has been had multiple times with different people, and there are a number of organizations that are trying their best to make a more professional version of CrossFit, but still the games are the CrossFit Games, and as long as they have that title, there is always going to be a tremendous draw for people to the original. And with that, it brings a enormous spotlight on the sport as CrossFit and the CrossFit Games. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on who you are and how you look at it. So for many people, it was watching the CrossFit Games that first got them to go into a CrossFit box. They saw these incredible athletes. They wanted to be like them, so they signed up to do CrossFit. Of course, there are other people that this is all they've seen of CrossFit as well. So when you're trying to convince them that their mother would actually benefit from going to the local CrossFit box and starting to do some fitness there, well, their only reference point is the CrossFit Games, and they feel, well, that's far too extreme for my elderly mother. No way, she shouldn't get involved in this. And then we also have the fact that the majority of the attention is given to the sport, and at times that will overshadow what all around the world local people are doing within CrossFit, how they are changing lives for the better. So could a separation of the sport and the methodology be something good? Could there be a sport that is just the go-to sport for people that do CrossFit that would like to express their fitness? Well, as long as the CrossFit Games are still a thing, I don't think that's going to happen. So now that that's out of the way, I'd like to talk about how, looking at grid, I thought about ways we could apply similar principles locally that would mean more people could get involved in competitions. And if you are somebody who watches grid, or you play grid and you're here because there was grid in the thumbnail, I'm not trying to steal your idea or daring to say I can improve upon it. I just think Grid UK is probably a long way away, but the principles would be pretty valid and could be used immediately. Now, if you don't follow grid, this is all you need to know for this video. So they compete as teams, pretty big teams, and they're teams of a mix of both male and female athletes. And then they have fitness races, burpees, thrusters, box jumps, shuttle runs, all the things we have this kind of love-hate relationship with. And then, of course, those more complex movements that I showed you at the beginning of the video. So we might be thinking, right, it just looks like CrossFit, maybe CrossFit dialed up to 11. But here's the difference. When you're looking at the teams, you have what are called utility players, and they are your all-rounders. They're basically CrossFit athletes. They're pretty good at everything. But then you have specialists. So they could be strength specialists, or they could be bodyweight gymnastics specialists. Now, why is that interesting? So let's just travel back to our local box for a second. I'm sure we all know that guy or girl that is just ridiculously strong. You give them a barbell and they will leave you in the dust. But as soon as we move over to the rig, well, then they're starting to have trouble. Maybe it's pull-ups, maybe it's muscle-ups. They just don't have the gymnastics abilities, especially when compared to just how good they are at anything strength-based. Now, quite often these people have maybe come over from playing sport for many years, so while they might not have that gymnastic ability, what they do still have is that competitive itch. So maybe they start looking at local competitions that they could go to. And here quite often is the problem. The RX division maybe has some high-skill gymnastics that they cannot do. So they say, well, I can't compete in the RX. So then they look at the scaled. Right, I can do all of these movements, but now everything's been scaled, including the weight. So either they don't go, or they go, they grab this barbell, they absolutely smash the workout, and people are saying, well, you shouldn't really be doing scaled, you're too good, you should be in the RX. So maybe they don't have such a good time. And it's all because they can't do some specific movements. And of course, we can flip that example on the other side. I'm sure we all know that gymnastics ninja who's a little bit smaller, incredible on the rig, but the heavier barbell is always going to be the limiting factor. But what if we could take on a workout as a team? So not a synchro workout or worm workout where we're all having to do things at the same time, but what if you could tag people in and out so that they could use their speciality when needed, whether that be on the rig or with the heavy barbell. No one is going to get stuck at any point in this workout. They'll just need to tag in the right man or woman for the job. Now, maybe it's just me, but I can think of a number of people at my local box that would fit into those categories and could get involved. So yeah, it would be good for them. It might allow them to start doing competitions, but I also see another potential benefit for the competitions themselves. First, think about the spectators. Competitions would not need to hold back thinking, well, I need to make sure that the level of gymnastics is something that everyone should be able to accomplish, at least at the top end. Or the barbell weights, or odd implements that we use need to also be at a weight that we know everyone should be able to move. Because if they know specialists are coming, they can really push the level of gymnastics or the weight on the barbell. And of course, that's going to be more interesting for the spectators to watch. And also, it's a nice opportunity for the athletes to show off. I also think another potential benefit could be that it might actually draw more people, one, to the competitions, but two, to CrossFit in general. Maybe you've got a friend who trains strongman or trains gymnastics. Now, you might never be able to get them to a classic CrossFit competition, but something like this, where you're bringing them on as a strength specialist or a gymnastics specialist, means that they might turn up to a competition that they wouldn't have done otherwise. And maybe looking around and seeing the rest of the team that are perhaps your more classic CrossFit athletes, they might decide, you know what? Actually, I'd like to give that a go, because then I could be more useful to my team if we decide to do this again in the future. So more and more people start to get eyes and maybe actually get involved in doing CrossFit itself. And now we have seen competitions play with the format. For me personally, the most obvious one is Strength in Depth Origins, where you have bigger teams from within the box, where you've got to have a mix of male, female, and masters athletes. So we can experiment with the format, and maybe it's already happened. If you know of a competition that does pretty much what I'm suggesting, let me know, because I'd love to talk about that. And then, of course, I haven't even touched on the standardized floor layouts, having a season, having teams that you can follow throughout that season, having tryouts to get people onto the team. So there is, a lot more I could talk about if you're interested. So let me know if you'd like me to kind of look into some other elements of grid, or even other kind of fitness racing that you think has interesting elements that could be utilized better within the CrossFit space. Let me know, because I'd love to look into that. And if you are here from grid and there's some stories that you think are really worth talking about, let me know as well, because I'd be really happy to look into those as well. And if you still think it's an absolute sin that I even spoke about grid, well, I'm sorry, and I hope you can forgive me. But actually, for me, it was really fun to look into something that I knew about, but I didn't really know about. And I'll be honest, I'm definitely going to check out some more grid, because it was quite fun to watch. So thank you for watching. If you do follow grid, let me know your team, and I hope I'll see you in a future video.